My name is Rich Anderson. I'm a Vice President with Utopia. Very happy to be on today to talk to you about a very exciting topic for us, Master Data Governance for Enterprise Asset Management. This is a new solution extension that Utopia and SAP have jointly released. It is available from SAP as a product. We're going to talk to you about that today. We're going to talk a little bit about how MDG and MDG for EAM fits into the overall enterprise information management stack. And we'll talk specifically about the business value that MDG for enterprise asset management can bring to your organizations. And if you take a look, really what we're trying to talk about, what the big challenge is reflected with this quote. This comes from a gentleman at Suncor, who's one of our Pathfinder customers for MDG EAM. And he says he can go out, purchase a car, and with that car he's going to have 30,000 parts, all of the maintenance that's required to repair and service that piece of equipment, to service that car. But he can go out and buy and purchase and build a multi-million-dollar or even billion-dollar facility, and he's not able to actually get the same information. He's not able to understand what parts are required, what repair, what service is required to make sure that huge investment, that multi-billion-dollar, multi-million-dollar plant requires in order to run most effectively. We believe that Master Data Governance for Enterprise Asset Management provides the foundation to solve that issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to David Quirk from the EIM COE at SAP. He's going to walk us through a little bit about the solution, about MDG in general, and how Master Data Governance can actually work for you, the customers that are on this call today. So David, if you don't mind, we'll hand it to you.
Thanks very much, Rich. Hello to everybody joining the call. SAP Enterprise Asset Management across the whole EAM space has a number of touch points, a number of places of interest, various software solutions that are provided by SAP and across the whole breadth of the topics that you see listed on the screen. Our prime focus for today's call is around the information management piece. So looking at this across the whole enterprise of information management, the different aspects to this, the different flavors of this, and we'll talk about the journey that you can go on through an EIM process at your company. Bearing in mind that the information creation, information governance pieces will still have flow-ons and touch points throughout everything that you see on the screen here today. Just to call one out specifically, environment, health, and safety. Making sure that your assets that are running in your plants are maintained efficiently, that are maintained appropriately on the right schedules, for example, will then make your workplace a safer place, make sure that you remain in compliance, and so on. So enterprise asset management, while focused on this information management corner of this slide, touches all aspects of the EAM process across an organization. So why is it important? I just touched on one, accidents and safety issues, equipment failures, safety risks, and so on. That can also leave yourself open if machines are not properly maintained to legal liability, regulatory and government controls, product liability risks from quality if your machines are not performing as they should. The maintenance inefficiency point, talking about inadequate and improper maintenance, poor reporting and visibility into asset histories, the inability to drill in and see how frequently an asset's been maintained, to see what schedules are recommended for that asset maintenance and so on, and make sure that the piece of equipment that you're looking at is in fact the right piece of equipment for you to be performing that analysis upon. Operational inefficiency, so increased downtime is huge for any plant maintenance centric organization, any asset-intensive industry. You want to make sure that your plants are running efficiently to achieve the maximum amount of productivity that you can, and squeeze every dollar from every potential minute of uptime that your plants can maintain. And of course, IT costs. Having a lot of systems running across a lot of different plants, a lot of siloed places where master data is stored, leads to a lot of inefficiencies. Inefficiencies with people trying to track down the right information, inefficiencies having to perform maintenance of this data potentially in multiple places, having inconsistent rules applied to the creation and the maintenance of your master data records, your equipment masters, functional locations, and so on, that will exist in your landscape. So lots of business impact, lots of challenges if you're not taking a holistic approach to enterprise information management within the EAM space. And there's two real flavors to this. I think it's a very good representation on this slide to show it as a scale, because they're both critical to the process, structured and unstructured information. So what I mean by that in the terms of structured information is your master data, your equipment master records, your functional locations, your MRO bill of materials, and so on. These foundational pieces of master data, very important to make sure that they are, you're able to trust that they're accurate, that all of that information is ready for use, so that whenever it's needed to be used in a transactional sense, whenever somebody needs to look that up to do business, to perform an update to something, to perform a repair to a machine, that they're looking at the right data and they can get that information very, very quickly. Governance, quality and retention controls, making sure that you properly govern that record, making sure that the right people approve the record throughout the governance and the maintenance and the creation process of your master data. So that's the structured piece of the puzzle. The unstructured piece, talking about unstructured content, we're talking about documents, PDFs, manuals, work histories, and so forth, other unstructured content that is vital for that day-to-day operation. You need to have that tied and linked into your business processes so that, you know, a technician, when he goes out to do a repair on the plant, can pull up the appropriate manual to do that repair, can pull up the most accurate maintenance histories related to that piece of machinery, and so on. And having both of these together, one without the other, will bring some benefits to an organization. Having both of them work together really does give you a holistic approach to the EAM space, and indeed all of master data across an organization, but very specific tie-ins, I think, to the EAM process, plant maintenance, asset maintenance, and so on. So SAP has a range of solutions. This slide has been tweaked very slightly to give it a flavor specific to the asset topic that we're discussing today, but it's intended to show the fact that moving around this circle, there's different wedges that are different aspects of an EAM process that you would want to undertake at an enterprise. So making sure that you understand your data, making sure that you have a view into your data, making sure that you deduplicate your data if you've got issues with your data right now. That's where our master data services and information steward products will lie, allowing you to access and profile that information and really get a sense for what data quality rules you need, where your trouble points might be, and how you can address that. SAP Master Data Governance is a solution that SAP has that gives you enterprise-wide master data control for several different domains of content. We'll talk about the standard content that's released, and the focus of this presentation is on the new domain of enterprise asset content that is a part of the MDG framework, allowing you to predefine governance rules, workflows, processes, validations, and make sure that this end-to-end process is handled in an auditable and repeatable fashion. And then the extended ECM by OpenText piece, that's the unstructured content that I was referring to on the previous slide. So we have SAP has a partnership with OpenText that with their extended ECM product, most specifically to allow the management and the control of the unstructured content. And that's another piece of this entire EAM puzzle. Today we're focusing, though, on the Master Data Governance solution, and most specifically the Enterprise Asset Management extension that's built by Utopia. So what does MDG as a basic framework give you? It gives you the ability to centrally govern and control your master data on top of the business suite. I think that's the critical aspect to the MDG solution and the biggest benefit that it brings and the scenario that it really tries to address. So companies, for governing master data, whether it be customer data, material data, financial data, or enterprise asset data, to be able to do that in a central fashion, following one set of globally defined rules, allowing for consistent definition of your master data, an authorization process that's defined and, again, consistent and audited to make sure the right people are touching the data at the right time in your governance process, and then finally the replication of that data through your landscape to allow it to be used in transactional systems and for transactional processing. Very specifically, the EAM add-on that was developed by Utopia in partnership with SAP gives us an extra domain of coverage for our master data solution. So you see on the screen the delivered object model that comes out of the box for SAP Master Data Governance has master data content that is delivered, data models, sample workflows, and so on, delivered for financial master data, and you see a lot of the types of things, the objects that are related to this on the screen, material master data, supplier and customer master data. So 4 critical master data domains across an enterprise. One glaring aspect that was missing from this, specific to asset-intensive industries, plant maintenance customers, was the ability to have content and the ability to govern the specifics around enterprise asset content. And so what Utopia did, again in partnership with SAP, was to build and enhance the MDG framework to add as another object a domain of content for enterprise asset management. So this is built on an MDG framework. So please don't think of this as being a solution in isolation, another type of solution in your landscape that you would have to manage and govern. MDG was deliberately built to be very closely aligned with SAP's business suite and ERP systems, and the enterprise asset management extension to MDG built by Utopia is delivered on that same MDG framework. And so you would see a seamless transition between deciding to govern your asset masters using this MDG solution, or your supply master data, or your material master data, would all look the same to end users, uses the same interfaces, will have the same touch points, will be the same approach for custom extensions and for ongoing maintenance, so and for support of that solution most critically. And so all of this gives a holistic approach to master data governance across an enterprise, and now we have a great way to address that structured content piece through master data governance of enterprise asset content for our solution extension that we're talking about. So the MDG capabilities that we're going to be highlighting here, out of the box content, so delivered data models, a delivered framework for governing your master data, delivered workflows that you can use, build on, enhance, extend, role definitions for typical roles, again designed to be built and extended, reusability and extensibility, so reuse of back-end structures, familiar tie-ins to those back-end structures, and the ability to extend that to meet your needs across an enterprise. Replication, the ability to replicate the data from and throughout your landscape as needed, and providing the appropriate governance, collaboration, and data quality checks throughout the entire governance process to make sure that your master data that's created using this solution is of the standards that you have set as an organization, that will meet your own internal standards, meet any government and regulatory standards that maybe need to be applied, and will be fully audited so that you can make sure that you're in compliance in that aspect of things as well. So talking about some generic MDG capabilities that apply across all of the domains and very specifically to the asset solution. The types of workflow that can be built, linear, distributed, and so you can have parallel workflow processes, you can have serial workflow processes, you can have workflow processes that spawn other workflows if you need to have a follow-up process for any reason. All of this can be defined and extended within the MDG application itself, and the content that's delivered will give you a good starting point for that, content that you can use out of the box, and if needed can be adapted to meet the specific governance needs of your organization. Roles and responsibilities are very important, so you want to make sure that throughout this governance process, the right people are touching your records at the right time, that they only have access to update the fields that their role would dictate they have access to, that the right approvers are approving the master data, and so on. One key point to talk about from the MDG framework perspective is this point about the master data stored in a separate repository. There is a staging area where during a master data creation process inside of the MDG framework, that master data will remain segregated inside of a staging area, separate tables within a database, to make sure that that data doesn't enter your primary storage, your main storage, until it's gone through your entire governance process. So you never have to worry about a partially created record. You never have to worry about having to back out a record if it's decided that that should be rejected or not approved for some reason. So that staging area concept is a critical piece of the MDG framework itself, and one that's utilized in full by the Utopia EAM solution for MDG. Data quality checks are critical. So by virtue of having a central approach to master data governance and master data management, you will have a central place where you can store and access your master data records, improving data quality. But additional to that, having automated data quality checks that are run to prevent the creation of duplicate records, to propose records that possibly are duplicated during your master data creation system, using the validations that are utilized in the back-end ERP system. The MDG, as I noted before, is built on top of a business suite system, so wherever MDG is deployed, that configuration that exists on that instance will be applied throughout the MDG governance process. Additional to that, you have the ability to build custom validations into your governance process as well, maybe for different exceptions, regional variations, or for whatever purpose you might need. And then, of course, enrichment. Enrichment is a key part of the master data creation process as well, helping to pull in data from external sources if needed throughout the master data governance process to ensure data quality and to ease the master data entry process for your end users. Replication is another critical piece. So in a lot of plant maintenance situations, there might be very separated and distributed processing systems, different plants, maybe different SAP instances or legacy systems throughout your landscape. And so you create your data centrally, and then as needed, you define replication rules that will determine how that data is sent through your landscape to make sure that that data reaches the right systems in the right way and is then ready for use by those transactional systems to run, innovate, and perform the daily tasks that your business would entail. And then reusability and extensibility. So the fact that it's built on top of business suite architecture allows those back-end structures to be reused and rebuilt. The data models are aligned with SAP data models in the back-end structures that are storing the various pieces of master data, and it's extensible. So content is delivered across all of the domains, the standard domains that I mentioned, the asset extension that I mentioned, and then every customer, as part of this process, will have the ability, if needed, to extend those data models and extend those structures, modify and extend the workflows, change the user interfaces if needed to make it completely customized and tailored for your customer's specific needs. So that ends my piece for the general MDG overview. I'm going to hand it over to Rich now, and he's going to take you into more detail of the specifics around the Utopia EAM Solex that was built. So Rich, over to you.
Thank you very much, David. So unfortunately, I'm experiencing a little bit of but what I wanted to at least address and talk about at this point is, what are the business drivers, what are the use cases that we've been seeing for master data governance for enterprise asset management, right? David's done a very nice job of giving us an overview of what's included in MDG, what is the value of MDG, how can it be used in your organization from an IT and business process standpoint. But what we want to cover now is how do we actually see value, how do we realize that value? What are those triggering events, for example, that might provide you, a customer, what is required to actually invest and look at this solution? There's a couple of the business drivers for Asset Master Data Governance that we think are critical. The first is probably, first and foremost, is capital projects. Effective information handover in a capital project is a very costly and important aspect of building out any sort of facility. We've seen that up to 1% of total capital project costs, so $1 million on $100 million, can be gained in efficiency using effective information handover. MDG for EAM can help you provide that process-centric approach to managing information about the assets, the equipment, their bills of material, function locations that are coming in as you build out that particular facility. Mergers and acquisitions. When you go out and you acquire a plant, when you acquire a facility, when you acquire another organization, there's tremendous amounts of information, tremendous amounts of data that need to be incorporated into your business framework, into your SAP environment. We'll talk a little bit about the capabilities of MDG to do not only that single processing, but that bulk processing that would be so valuable in that acquisition type framework. Shutdowns, turnarounds, planned outages with zero utility. Maintenance and construction activities during those planned outages, during those shutdowns and turnarounds, can result in changes to thousands of pieces of equipment, right? Master data has mass changes in there. And if you're not able to effectively manage that change, if you're not able to effectively manage the data as it's coming into that system, once you flip the switch to go live again, once you get that facility up and running again, you're not going to be able to maintain that data or that piece of equipment effectively without the appropriate data in there, without knowing what the planned maintenance needs to be, without knowing what that piece of equipment is that's then redeployed into your field. Regulatory compliance, EH&S, right? So anytime that you are maintaining and trying to keep safety critical assets in place and up and running and not, having catastrophic failures, that is absolutely critical, right? Asset master data changes can impact EH&S performance. So, ultimately we're trying to go towards operational excellence, right? So if you are involved in a program or a project that's transforming or improving your processes leading to increased productivity from a maintenance standpoint, MDG for EAM is going to provide you that. This is an architectural overview of SAP's Master Data Governance. So if you look on the left, you see the EIM solutions, right? SAP Information Steward, Data Services, Power Designer, NetWeaver MDM. All of that integrates into the SAP Master Data Governance solution, which is built in to the SAP framework. This is no different, as David said, than any of the other MDG out-of-the-box content that is available. So vendor, customer, finance, material. EAM now provides you a very holistic framework from which you can manage that master data. It is built in ABAP. It can be deployed in SAP HANA. It can be on-premise or in the cloud. And more importantly, it does integrate into that EIM solution stack so that you can monitor your data, so that you can clean your data, and so that from a sustainability standpoint, you can keep that data clean, leveraging master data governance. Our next slide is the proposed roadmap in phases of the solution. So currently available from SAP, you can purchase Equipment Master and Functional Location, two of the most important, right, pieces of data in your maintenance practices. Coming in November, we will have bill of materials. And then June, for those of you that have linear assets deployed and are deploying the linear asset management capability within SAP Plant Maintenance, that functionality will be available June 2015. We'll get to work centers, task lists, maintenance plans, measuring points, et cetera, throughout the course of the deployment of this, so that ultimately by the end of 2016, you will have a complete set of data objects in MDG AM that will manage your maintenance processes from end to end. Licensing is very similar to the existing licensing process of other MDG domains. So it is done by blocks of 20,000 records. From an upgrade standpoint, as a customer, you're going to receive product updates with additional objects and capabilities via your standard SAP maintenance contract. There is no additional contract that's required. You actually just go through SAP for receiving support, for receiving all of your OSS and support packs from SAP. Maintenance comes from SAP. And Utopia will support that, if there are any additional escalations. But, this solution extension really does include that complete data model, the workflows, the change requests, all of the replication models that David talked about from your typical MDG domains. So what I'm going to talk through right now is the Enterprise Asset Management extension and what that process flow archetype looks like. Okay, so if you look at the typical maintenance process in MDG, the process usually will start when a user requests new master data or changes to existing master data, or when changes to that master data are requested through data flow into the system through an API. So at this moment, the so-called MDG change request is created. The request is essentially a container that keeps all of the intended changes within that staging area, right? So if you imagine a maintenance person out in the field, he'll go into MDG, he'll say, I'm going to be changing this particular piece of equipment to this particular piece of equipment. It might be a valve, it might be a ball bearing, it might be, a significant motor that has a bill of materials associated with it. This container is actually kept separate from the productive master data, right? So essentially ensuring that all the changes are only used in production after that final approval. It gives you the ability to actually send the changes of this master data out to approval to other people within the organization. Via the workflow, the change request is then handed over from one person to the next in order for everyone to contribute their knowledge to complete that master data. The good thing about that change request is also that the data can be stored incomplete in between. What that means is that the company can decide how many people shall contribute, who contributes what, and regardless if the EAM system could save the master data in that current status. During the maintenance, the data is always validated by the system. Validation reuses existing business logic and the customized settings in the SAP plant maintenance system. It can also integrate various services for data enrichment and cleansing. So you can essentially add your own validation rules internally and externally, like all maintenance part numbers. For example, all maintenance part numbers need to follow a certain pattern. At some point in the workflow will meet a person for approval of those changes, and then only after that approval is the data moved from the staging area into the productive master data so that it can be used in the business processes and replicated to other systems. Often we see that that organizations only put a subset of all master data attributes under central governance. Those other attributes might be enriched in the receiving systems according to those local needs. So I hope that gives you a good understanding of what that process would look like, where you have a maintenance person in the field that might be, send these changes up to supervisors and those supervisors so that when there are changes that come in, there are no challenges to that process. It is managed holistically. The next slide is a review of the capabilities, but more so that integrated data object model. So previously we saw David talk about the data models from materials, from finance, from suppliers. If you look at the out-of-the-box data model that's provided from equipment master and functional location, you're going to have your basic and general data, so things like reference data, manufacturer data, class assignments. You'll also have location data, as well as organizational data, so account assignment, responsibility, structuring. On the functional location side, you'll have that basic and general data, including descriptions, manufacturer, location, as well as your organizational data, including account assignment environment and responsibilities. These data models will be extended and expanded over the course of the time like any other software release. So if there's anyone that is interested in some of those capabilities, new capabilities that we'll roll out through our roadmap, feel free to contact us and we can talk with you about them. If you look at slide 21, what we did is we actually pulled a couple of screenshots out of MDG 3AM so that you could get a feel, a sense for what the solution looks like, how it interacts. And I wanted to at least show a couple of the capabilities because I think that they're unique and they're important for the teams that are on today to understand. So you are going to have the ability to go through single object processing, which is really that tactical change control, right? You might have one piece of equipment, one functional location that changes within that environment. It is meant to facilitate ease of use in a simplified process. You also have the capability to go through multi-object processing. So it can be accommodating of multiple input methodologies. It supports roles, different roles and stakeholders. The staging area enables complex, longer duration EAM projects. So if you think about a new SAP plant coming into your facility, if you think about a capital project, if you think about that shutdown and turnaround or merger and acquisition, that multi-object processing is going to provide you a lot of value to handle all of the data coming into your system. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about the user interface. All of this is configurable through the Web Pro drag and drop UI design environment. So those of you that have used MDG in the past or have some of the other domains deployed, you should be very familiar with this. I'd also say that this age, such as rule-based autofill, leveraging configuration rules within your plant maintenance environment, drop-down and pick lists, they are reflected and pulled directly from your SAP environment so that you're minimizing inaccurate information and you're facilitating error-free loads. You're facilitating the business to have access to the right data at the right time so that they can complete their job effectively. Part of the challenge that we see in the maintenance space is that maintenance professionals typically spend about 40% of their time looking for the data that's going to be required to perform their daily jobs. If you can think about the ease of use that this provides, it really is significant. It's going to make your maintenance professionals in the field, in your facilities, in your plants, remotely, much more efficient in their day-to-day job activities. We talked a little bit about the business rule and validation framework. So the business rule framework is leveraged here. There are interactive rules and validation tests so that the immediate feedback on data quality and completeness can be provided back to the person that's actually leveraging the MDG system. And if you look at the next slide, this talks about that business rule framework, right? It does provide intuitive means for rule creation so that if you have to have facilities with rules, specific rules, it's very simple logic that can be built into your maintenance framework, sort of the if and else logic or table-driven truth, so that you don't have to go in as you would have previously, and build out a bunch of complicated ad workflows. So this is pretty much the last of the slides. We'll give you an opportunity to ask some questions here. But I do want to have, just an overview. Ultimately, we think that the MDG EAM solution provides you, it really does round out that MDG solution, that MDG framework. It provides a holistic ability for those of you that have large maintenance organizations, for those of you that have a lot of capital tied up in the physical assets in their environment, it does provide you a great solution to manage that data. It's flexible, its ease, consumption is absolutely critical. It does come with built-in best practices around the maintenance equipment information, around functional locations, around bills of material, so that you can be assured that that data model is going to work for you in your particular industry. It reuses existing processing logic, right? So you don't have to relearn something. The logic that's built into SAP is leveraged by MDG. But ultimately, it is that integrated, out-of-the-box data replication, integrated into the EIM solution, integrated into your business process that's going to provide value to the maintenance organizations that will be using this.
The first one is just a clarity question. It says MDG is built on an application like SAP ERP.
So MDG, from a technical perspective, is deployed by activating business functions on top of an ECC instance. And so if you have an ECC instance, it could be the same instance in a landscape that's used transactionally, or what a lot of customers do is they have a separate governance hub that they dedicate for their master data governance implementation. They would have a separate instance, and then on that instance they would activate and deploy MDG.
The next question is, how does the system share information where an electric motor equipment number 123 in one SAP instance USA is identical to electric motor equipment number ABC in another SAP instance in Brazil?
MDG makes use of two topics very much along the same lines, key mapping and value mapping. And so absolutely, it's a very good question. Across all of the master data objects that MDG governs, it's possible to have different numbers for the main key, different material numbers, different equipment numbers, whatever that might be, existing in the local transactional systems, and then have one central MDG record that will then understand that when a change to that record is distributed to system A, it might be record number 1000, and in system B, that exact corresponding record is record 2000 in that system B. So when that change is made once centrally, it's distributed throughout your entire landscape, and MDG will be able to keep track of any differences that occur there. Value mapping is very similar, but it's along the lines of things like perhaps a good example might be a unit of measure, that maybe you have a different abbreviation for a unit of measure or for a different country code or a currency code, whatever the case may be. And again, you can manage different sets of those values in different transactional systems, having one master set in MDG that is aware of the differences that exist across your landscape.
The next question is, does this solution support standardization of classification characteristic data for technical objects, for example, ISO 14224 or other standards?
So David, now correct me if I'm wrong, and this is part of the roadmap discussion that we might have to follow up with the attendee that asked this question. But we are standardizing around class and characteristics within this solution, and I believe that that's part of the next release. I don't know for certain how it supports ISO 14224. I know that it can support ISO 14224 standards. And I believe that that was taken into account during the development of this. But from a class and characteristic standpoint, I think I would need to follow up unless, David, you have an answer for that.
Exactly what you had just said, that we can take that as a follow-up action and get back to whoever asked that question, exactly either how that would be handled today or where that would be on the roadmap, as Rich outlined, the roadmap of planned objects that are to be released over the coming months and even years.
The next question is, what is Utopia's role in this, since it is sold via SAP in terms of services, consulting, training, etc. in the U.S. and around the world?
So we are going to continue supporting the ongoing development of the solution. So from a software standpoint, Utopia will be developing releases and following along on that roadmap that we briefly went through earlier in the presentation. From an implementation standpoint, we 100% will happily work with our customers that end up purchasing MDG for EAM to implement the solution. We'll also work with system integrators to enable them and work with them as they look to potentially deploy this at their customers. Early on, we think it's critical that Utopia remain engaged because we want to ensure a very successful rollout of the product. We're actually going live on one of our first customers this weekend. We're quite excited about that. So if you are interested, if you are considering the MDG EAM solution, feel free to contact either myself or Mike Jordan, whose details are included in this deck, and we can talk with you about what deployment options look like and what that implementation timeline might be.
The next question is, how does the management of materials relate to EAM?
The material master itself is considered a separate object. So as Rich outlined when he was going through in more detail the EAM content that is released, the initial releases of the EAM objects are Equipment Master, Function Location, MRO, BOM is being released quite imminently within the next few weeks. That will be released as well, and other roadmap topics. Material Master content itself, so maintenance of materials, raw materials, finished goods, etc. within a landscape, that's handled by SAP's specific content that is delivered for the MDG for material domain. And so there'll be touch points between materials that are in your landscape that will relate to the maintenance of equipment, maintenance of other EAM-related tasks, just as supply master data objects would be relevant as well, another piece of master data that maybe has a touch point into the EAM process itself. If you want to order some spare parts to make sure that your supplier information is accurate and easy to access, for example, could be another touch point. I don't know if Rich, you want to add anything or elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, when I look at the material master, it is 100% critical to effective functionality within the asset management space, right? If you don't have materials that are correctly governed, then as you assign those materials to particular functional locations or to equipment, or you build out your bills of material, you need to have good material information there. So the nice thing about the MDG solution platform in general is that it is interconnected, and it provides you a way to govern all of that data that is critical to not only your supply chain processes, but your maintenance processes, right? So I don't think that it's something that you can split management of, right? You want to be holistic in that approach to the data that are so absolutely critical to your business.
The next question is, will the bulk load support the Excel version of data as we do with LSMW?
Yeah, absolutely so. And we would be happy to actually take anyone that's interested through a demo. We will have another session that is a little bit more of a deep dive into the MDG EAM solution, including a demo of the system. But when we present that bulk upload, you leverage different types of formats. So you can leverage a flat file, you can leverage Excel. David, do you know what else is actually available from a bulk standpoint?
Generically from MDG, common file interfaces can be used. So as was mentioned, flat files, Excel, as well as service calls that could be used to get data in there as well. I would defer to you or to a later follow-up if there's a specific question related to what was done for the EAM solution itself.
The next question is, how does it work with Information Steward?
And this is actually something that we did not discuss, but I think is actually very interesting. Part of the value of Information Steward is that it really does provide you ability to monitor data within your systems, and so that includes EAM-related data, equipment data, bills of material, material masters. One of the things that Utopia co-developed with SAP is an RDS, a rapid deployment solution for Information Steward around enterprise asset management data. So there are 55 or so different rules that we've built out within Information Steward that can help you analyze, look at the data that's specific to, mission critical to your maintenance processes. When bad data or a bad actor is found, Information Steward can integrate into MDG to kick off a workflow that says, hey, I found this bad piece of information, this piece of equipment isn't complete, this piece of equipment doesn't meet the business rules that you've established. Let's kick off a workflow in MDG so that you can actually remediate the bad actor that you may have found.
Talking about LSMW, or how do you manage acquisitions of other companies, data conversion and mapping of their equipment to our equipment?
That's likely something, if you remember the slide that I presented at the start showing the entire EIM portfolio. So that the idea of ongoing merger and acquisition, or indeed staged rollouts throughout your landscape. Maybe you want to implement a master data governance process for a particular domain, say assets, for one division of your company, one instance in your landscape, and then add other instances into that later over time for various reasons. All of these are great candidates for the SAP Data Services and indeed Information Steward to give that business user the visibility on top of that platform to go in and help with the identification of duplicate records, the resolution of conflicts, the cleansing and the updating of data, and so on. Once that data is loaded, once that data is in your MDG repository, from that point forward, the MDG governance process will handle data quality in an ongoing fashion to make sure that your data is kept at a high standard. All of those benefits that were discussed, one central place where the data is maintained, one set of rules, one process, defined process, and so on.
The next question is, I understand MDG does the data governance workflow, but MDM does the cleansing. Is that correct?
Yeah. Sorry, Rich, I was going to say I would almost defer to the previous answer that I had to that question. I would say that in most cases today, I mean, SAP does have the NetWeaver MDM product that we've sold and is still in our price list, but a lot of the functionality that's being utilized there and a lot of the customers that are using NetWeaver MDM are looking at our MDG framework to meet their master data needs moving forward. NetWeaver MDM certainly would be a possible software solution that could help with cleansing and consolidation up front, as could data services. It would depend on the specifics of the project to really go into that in more detail.
How does this system handle data mapping and missing data if it does?
Meaning, I'm assuming meanings throughout the governance process. You will have defined rules throughout the governance process that, let's just say, for example, you have a 3-step workflow process with an initial data entry role, a supervisor data entry role, and then a final approver. At each of those steps, you can define what rules are appropriate to be applied to the data, so that workflow wouldn't be able to be advanced from one step to the next unless all of the fields that were required for that initial role were populated. So that would be one way to ensure that. You can also set up conditional rules where for certain types of equipment, for example, you're going to apply a specific master data quality check or rule to that data, but that might not apply to every piece of equipment in your organization. So you can have conditional rules as well to ensure that quality. And then finally, once the data goes through the entire process, it's governed, it's approved, you've got your step-by-step checks. It won't get written to the back-end system unless it meets the basic rules that are configured in that ECC system as well.
How would you work with us if we have an instance of SAP in one part of the company and software from another company in a large, recently acquired subsidiary?
MDG is very closely aligned with the SAP Business Suite products as we discussed today, but there were several slides, if you remember, about the extensibility of the MDG platform, and so I would say that just as a general answer to that question, that in all likelihood, either one of two things, that you would like to move to perhaps long-term integrating all of that content on one SAP instance or multiple SAP instances throughout your landscape, Or if you want to keep it separate, if you want to keep managing that legacy system to run that other branch of your company or other acquired company, MDG running as a separate central governance process would be able to govern, obviously, the SAP data that we've described. It's very closely aligned with that and could be extended to meet the needs of that other system that you have in your landscape. I would imagine there would be a lot of common data throughout that anyway. I mean, if we think about the key fields that are going to be a part of any master data record, be it a supplier, a material, supplier is going to have name and address. That's going to be common throughout all systems that are going to need that supply record, equipment masters, the equipment number, the description of the equipment, specifications related to that. These are going to be probably common master data fields. So a lot of the standard delivered content will likely be applicable to a legacy system, and for those fields that aren't, it could certainly be extended.
Yeah, and David, to that point, there are many customers out there that we're currently working with that specifically might be leveraging SAP Plant Maintenance as one of their CMMS systems, but then they also have Maxima, they also have, a Lawson or an Infor type solution. So the ability to extend to other systems is absolutely there, something that, MDG for EAM as well as the other MDG solutions support.
Do I need TREX, and that's spelled T-R-E-X, for enterprise search capabilities if I deploy MDG on HANA or as a sidecar?
As a general comment, TREX is not required for every MDG domain. In some of the early releases of MDG, it was a requirement for MDG for material, and I am not 100% certain whether HANA can replace the data quality requirement for TREX for material masters, but I know that for the other domains, standard domains delivered by MDG, that you would have the option to run TREX. You could run the DQM engine from data services, or indeed you could run HANA as well. And I'm fairly confident that you could use HANA for material master as well. I don't know if, Rich, you have.
I don't know the answer. Yeah, I don't know the answer on the EAM solution. That's something that we will happily follow up with the participant that asked the question.
The next question is, how is Master Data Governance for EAM different from SAP's Rapid Deployment solution?
So a rapid deployment solution is actually predefined content that specifically addresses a particular area. This solution is a product that is sold and supported by SAP. It is a product that is going to go through your standard support capabilities components, right? So if you have a challenge with the system, you call SAP support, and they will help you through that. And in an RDS, the RDS is not typically a supported product in the same way that MDG for EAM is. Do you have any other comments around that, David?
No, I think that's a good answer for that question.
For a new installation, what would be the base Business Suite EAM modules required?
The only thing that is a prerequisite for this solution is ECC. Now the value comes in if you're running SAP Plant Maintenance. Outside of that, there's no other true requirements to deploy the solution.
The only thing I would add to that is that from an enhancement pack perspective for ECC, now being very clear, this applies to the ECC instance where MDG is deployed. So you can have transactional systems at a very low release of ECC or whatever in your landscape, or as we said, legacy systems. But for the instance where MDG is deployed, where it resides, that should be of at least enhancement pack 6 or enhancement pack 7 for ECC. That would be the only technical requirement for that to make sure that could run. But again, it can talk to systems that are below. You could have an EHP 5 transactional system, an EHP 4 transactional system, run MDG as a governance hub on EHP 6 or 7, and it would be perfectly supported and fine.
Is this only applicable to plant maintenance or also retail, pharmaceuticals, etc.? So they want to know if it's applicable to other industries.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, so from an industry standpoint, one of the customers that we're looking at is a retailer. We're working with pharmaceutical companies. Anyone that has equipment that they're out there trying to maintain, anyone that's leveraging SAP plant maintenance, this is a viable solution. One of the customers that's actually looking at this, the retailer, has commercial bakery operations, right? And so their bakery, they are looking to maintain that equipment effectively, and MDG for EAM could potentially provide them that capability.